Unanimous consent to enter into the record from the American Immigration Council, October 2024, mass deportation, devastating cost to America, its budget and economy.
Without objection, so ordered. Chair recognizes Mr. Khanna from California.
Mr. Chair.
Wait, I'm sorry. Mayor Wu needs a short break to attend to her young child. Mayor.
Mr. Chairman, I got the note that the baby's okay for now, so I'll continue. But thank you. I will. I believe from my husband that the baby's okay, and
okay, well,
and the arrangement, if it's okay, was that everyone would take a break, so I wouldn't have to go into a back room by myself to nurse when it's time. But thank you.
Chair recognizes Mr. Khanna.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I find the Republican position in this hearing quite ironic, because the Republicans are the party that are always touting local government, state government, local control, and not having federal overreach. So I want to explore actually one of your favorite topics on the other side of the aisle, the infamous mask mandates. I know how much you love them. When CDC came out with the mask mandate order of January 29, 2021, they said that we needed to have fines of $1,500 for anyone who didn't wear a mask on a plane or in a public space. And they said that there needed to be referred criminally to the Transportation Authority if they violated it more than once. Now, Governor Abbott said in Executive Order 38, we're not going to have our cities enforce the mask mandate. And Governor DeSantis said the same thing. We're not going to have our local police enforce the mandate. I want to ask Mayor Adams and Mayor Wu, because you had slightly different views on the mask mandate, but Mayor Adams, you were actually praised in New York for saying, we are going to take away some of these mask mandates earlier so businesses can open and there can be a revival in New York. Did you ever, in law enforcement, to your knowledge, enforce the CDC mask mandate and ask your law enforcement to fine people who didn't wear a mask $1,500?
What we did was looked at the science and looked at how it will impact business, and after issuing warnings in education.
But I think it's fair to say, Mayor, right? You never referred anyone to the Transportation Department for prosecution, and you never had local police out there saying we're going to fine people $1,500 with the CDC mandate.
The goal was to always ensure that people will carry out the procedure, and we did several education and warning in the process.
Mayor Wu, you were a great advocate of masks and looked at the science. Do you know if your city government actually ever used police resources to carry out the CDC or Transportation Department's mask mandate where they were fining $1,500 or referring for criminal prosecution?
I am not aware of any incidents of someone in Boston having been fined or prosecuted for any mask-related issues. We certainly prioritize public health and saving lives, and so our role as a city was to provide positive communication, outreach, make sure there were signs and different community organizations that could go and remind people to stay safe and do their best to take care of each other and their families.
As much of an advocate as you were for masks, and I was an advocate for masks, would you have been hesitant to order your law enforcement, your local police, to say if someone was violating those mask mandates that we need to cooperate and turn them over to the Transportation Department for prosecution? Would that have given you some pause if the federal government were saying use your police departments to fine people $1,500 and give us their records for criminal prosecution?
Yes, it would have.
And so I guess I'm trying to understand, you know, if we set this precedent that we want cities to be enforcing every federal mandate, then what happens when there's a new Democratic president that comes and says we want a mask mandate that the Republicans may not want? And when there are conservatives like Governor DeSantis or Governor Abbott saying we don't want our cities to enforce that. Do you see, Mayor Wu, any difference between a federal government asking you to enforce laws that ICE is doing versus a federal government asking you to enforce a mask mandate or, frankly, to enforce gun laws that may not be what your local city department is focused on?
It does seem that local authority is part of our democracy and part of our system of government.
Isn't the real issue here not one of immigration, but of federalism? Isn't the question, I mean, everyone agrees that there needs to be, if there's someone who's convicted of a crime, that ICE has the right to enforce those laws. The question is just, are you going to have local governments in this country be beholden to every new president's directives and armed for enforcing that? My view is that we ought to have local governments be able to use their police officers for their priorities. That, in its essence, is federalism, and it actually used to be the conservative Republican position.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair recognizes Dr. Fox from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mayor Johnson, in the last 4 years, how much has Chicago spent on care for illegal aliens?
Thank you for that question, Congresswoman. So since 2022, since the governor of Texas began
Just
shipping.
tell me a number. I don't need a speech. Just tell me a number.
So since 2022, since the governor of Texas was shipping individuals to cities across this country, the city's budget, roughly 1% of the city's budget over the course of 4 years.
Mayor Johnston, the same question, and I don't need a speech, just a number.
Thank you, Dr. Congresswoman. Thank you, Congresswoman. It's $79 million over the last 2.5 years.
Mayor Adams, same question. How much has New York spent to care for illegal aliens?
Approximately $6.9 billion went out of our taxpayers' funds.
Mayor Wu, same question. How much has Boston spent to care for illegal aliens in the last 4 years?
We do not ask about immigration status and giving city services and providing that access, so we do not have a number.
Taxpayers have been bearing the brunt of the massive wave of illegal aliens who've entered the United States. The Biden administration seemingly declared taxpayers and hardworking Americans collateral damage in the pursuit of open borders. Again, Mayor Johnson, are NGOs providing services to illegal aliens in Chicago?
In accordance with the Welcoming City Ordinance, our sister agencies or city departments, we do not seek the status of any individual that is seeking service.
Mayor Johnston, are NGOs providing services to illegal aliens in Denver?
Thank you, ma'am. When folks arrive on the streets without food or resources or shelter, we do provide food or shelter regardless of where folks arrive from.
Mayor Adams, same question.
Yes, in combination of city agencies and nonprofits, we responded to the migrant asylum seekers humanitarian crisis that hit our city.
And Mayor Wu, I assume you don't know their status, but do you know if there are NGOs are providing services to people arriving in your city without any kind of documentation?
There are community organizations, many of them in Boston, who seek to serve all of our Boston residents.
Congress must provide oversight and ensure accountability for taxpayer funds going to NGOs. Agents from Customs and Border Protection have been outspoken in opposition to allowing NGOs to assist illegal aliens in subversion of law and order. When asked if NGOs are working at cross purposes to the mission of Border Patrol agents, the chief of the National Border Patrol Council said, quote, "Most definitely, and they should not be allowed, but our government allows it," end quote. NGOs receiving taxpayer funding through grants pay for everything from food, shelter, and transportation to legal services that help the migrants traverse Mexico. That is why I introduced H.R. 245, the Grant Integrity and Border Security Act. This bill would require all NGOs who apply for a federal grant to certify as part of their application that they have not, will not, and are not engaging in acts that violate federal immigration law. If NGOs continue violating our immigration laws, then my bill would ensure that no federal funds can ever go to the violators. It's time to pass this bill, ensure accountability, and secure our cities and the border. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair recognizes Ms. Brown from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today, we've heard my colleagues on the other side of the aisle demean and dehumanize immigrants, choosing fear-mongering and political theater over real solutions. So let's take a moment to set the record straight. The best chance for comprehensive immigration reform came in 2013, when a bipartisan Senate majority passed a bill strengthening border security and providing a path to citizenship for longtime residents. But House Republicans killed it. Fast forward a decade later to last year, the Senate crafted another bipartisan deal, one that would have enhanced border security and tackled the fentanyl crisis with better technology and more agents. But Donald Trump torpedoed it, preferring anti-immigration rhetoric to real solutions. So this isn't about fixing the problem, it's about exploiting it. And let's not forget, the president wasn't complaining about this when he was employing undocumented immigrants at his resort. We all remember President Trump's tired old tactics from his first term, the harmful Muslim ban, referring to black and brown countries as quote-unquote shithole countries, and the cruel images of kids in cages. This time around is no different. President Trump signed multiple executive orders before even attempting to work with Congress. Mind you, a Republican-controlled Congress. So this isn't about policy, it's about fear. For the last decade, Trump has pushed menacing messages portraying all immigrants as criminals. But it isn't just coming from Trump. It's being amplified by right-wing media. A recent Ipsos poll found that people who watch Fox News are twice as likely to believe myths about immigration, including the false idea that immigrants commit more crimes than native-born Americans. This is objectively false, yet 2 in 3 Fox viewers believe it is true. This serves a purpose: fueling outrage, distracting from real solutions, and keeping the conversation stuck in a cycle of fear instead of facts. And Trump's latest immigration crackdown reinforces these misperceptions. ICE raids, choreographed for cameras, deportation sweeps with photo ops, wardrobe changes, and tough talk. The cruel performative videos of immigrants in shackles. $200 million in taxpayer money to air pro-Trump propaganda ads. Talk about waste, fraud, and abuse. All spectacle, no substance, all performance, no plan. On the campaign trail, J.D. Vance and Donald Trump promoted vile and xenophobic lies about Haitian immigrants in my state of Ohio. And now the Trump administration has moved to strip protections from 500,000 Haitians. These are people who have lived, worked, and contributed to this country for years. And they came here the right way, the legal way. But instead of recognizing their contributions, we are forcing them back to a country plagued by violence, instability, and humanitarian crisis. All so Trump can claim 500,000 more deportations. The cruelty isn't just the point, it's their pleasure. So let's be honest about what's really going on here. Mayor Johnson of Chicago, what sort of an impact will the Trump administration's decision to allow arrests at sensitive locations like hospitals, preschools, churches, and courts have on your city?
Thank you for that question. As a welcoming city space, it's important that the trust between the community and law enforcement is strong. That's ultimately how we have built a safer city. Just this year alone, violent crime is down 20%. Any type of threat to the civility and to the humanity of people is a threat to the evolution of our democracy. And so it's incumbent upon Washington to ensure that we are funding our education system, that we are funding our transportation system, our healthcare system, creating more jobs. Just since I've been in office, we've increased youth employment, summer jobs by over 40%. Making sure that our young people see their purpose is the value of this democracy. And so I call on this body to continue to invest in the city of Chicago that sends billions of dollars to Washington.
Thank you. Fear and cruelty are not the solution. It's distinctly un-American and a dangerous distraction from the Congress's responsibility to actually deliver progress on this challenging facing our country. And with that, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Groffman from Wisconsin.
Yeah, just a couple comments first. As far as the idea of who's committing crimes, we have no idea how many illegal immigrants in this country are committing crimes because nobody keeps track. Okay, if I go to a prison or a jail in Wisconsin with, I don't know, 1,500 inmates, and I ask how many of these people are here illegally or how many are citizens of another country, nobody will know the answer to that question. So that's why we don't have hard facts on how many crimes people committed. The other thing I like to point out is every year in this country, about 850,000 new people from other countries are sworn in as American citizens. I don't know of Donald Trump ever talking about reducing that number. Maybe he should reduce that number, but I've never heard him talk about reducing that number. Our concern here was illegal immigration, and I would hope the vast majority of Americans think we ought to have a immigration law that the 850,000 new citizens every year go through. But if we're going to have an immigration law, it means we have to do something with the people who try to become permanent residents without going through the proper structure. Now, I think part of our problem here is we have a lot of people who don't understand why we have an immigration law at all. And I want to ask all four of you as I go down, we go down the row here, do you believe the United States should have an immigration law, or do you believe that just anybody should be able to show up and come in? And we'll start with Mayor Adams there.
I strongly believe we need to have an immigration law. I strongly believe we need to secure our borders. We witnessed a 90% decrease, and we're seeing that play out in our city. So we should have a strong immigration law.
Good. And I'll ask this question then. If you believe we should have an immigration law, and then we'll get all four of you here, if you believe that, do you believe people who ignore the law, whatever that law is, should be allowed in the country?
I think that all of us must be held accountable to the law, and if we secure our borders to make sure before they come in that is done correctly, it is not going to impact cities to carry that burden. Like I said, close to $7 billion in tax dollars.
Mr. Johnson, do you believe we ought to have an immigration law in this country, or do you believe everybody should just be able to walk in here and set up shop?
Thank you, sir. I do believe we should have an immigration law. I do believe we should have secure borders. I do believe we should fix our asylum process. I do believe we should let dreamers get access to permanent citizenship.
Okay, then the question is,
if
somebody ignores that law and comes in this country, do you believe whoever, ICE or Border Patrol or anybody, should spin them around and send them out, or can they just ignore the law and because they, however, cross the Rio Grande, overstating a visa, whatever, are here? Do you believe that we ought to do something to the people who are ignoring the law?
Thank you, sir. In the case of the folks we're seeing, they are coming here because they are claiming asylum. When they claim asylum, they then have a right to a day in court to see if that asylum claim is
The
valid.
question is, though, if I come in this country and stay here, and I have not gone through any formal process to become a citizen or to be a visa, legal visa or whatever, should we kick that person out?
The folks that we're serving, sir, are trying very hard to navigate that legal process. It's often a 7-year wait for a court date when they arrive to this country, so part of it is the backlogged administrative need at the border.
Every month under President Biden, at least the statistics I have, 30 to 40,000 people, what are called gotaways, came across the southern border, didn't ask for asylum, didn't ask for anything. Do you believe that people who just come across that way should be escorted out of the country, or do you believe just because they ran between the designated checkpoints that they, as the result, get to stay here forever?
Again, sir, we're serving folks who are seeking asylum or have status,
Well, of
like
course,
temporary
you
protective
you
status.
wouldn't even know that.
Or CBP-1.
Okay, next, Mayor, Mayor Johnson, buddy from Chicago. What do you think? Should we have an immigration law in this country, or should anybody who comes here just be able to stay here?
I do support the bipartisan legislation that was passed out of the Senate for comprehensive immigration
Well,
reform.
no, that's not answering the question. Right now, people are breaking the law. Do you believe the United States should have an immigration law? As far as I know, every country in the world has an immigration law. Maybe there's one outlier or something. And we have laws in the United States. Do you believe if people come here and break the law that they should be escorted out, or do you believe they just get to stay here forever?
Our immigration system is broken. We have not had comprehensive
like the
immigration
answer.
reform since 1986.
Wu?
May I answer fully?
Yeah, his time's expired, but
Okay.
feel free to answer. Do you want Mayor Wu to answer your question, or are you finished?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Congressman. Yes, I do believe we need, cities everywhere clearly need an immigration law that has secure borders, comprehensive and consistent, compassionate pathways to residency and citizenship, resources to adjudicate the complexities of the law. And at the same time, I do not support mass deportation. That would be devastating for our economy, and there are millions of people who are running our small businesses, going to our schools.
Okay.
Thank you.
Get
Chair recognizes, and I must add, I don't think anyone's calling for mass deportation, but Chair recognizes Mr. Garcia. Wait, what? From California.
Thank you. Well, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank all of our witnesses for being here today. Before I came to Congress, I was the mayor of Long Beach, California for 8 years. It's a diverse city of about 500,000 people, so I appreciate the work that mayors do. As mayor, I signed the Long Beach Values Act to protect all of our residents, including immigrants and undocumented residents. We set up justice funds to support people that were facing deportation, defending immigrants in court. These are policies that are strongly supported by my residents back home because they are good for all the community and make Long Beach safer. Now, we also know that immigrants make our communities vibrant and thriving places to live. The facts are that sanctuary jurisdictions or jurisdictions that welcome immigrants are overwhelmingly safer than non-sanctuary jurisdictions. That's actually a fact. Immigrants, both documented and undocumented, are also less likely to be incarcerated or to commit crimes than native-born people. We know this to be true. Again, these are facts, and mayors have every right to pursue the policies that you know are best for your residents. Now, the Trump administration has threatened to prosecute some of the mayors on the panel today and force them to comply with his extremist agenda. But however, Mayor Adams, you are in a different position. You, of course, are already facing serious criminal charges. And Mayor Adams, I assume that you are not going to commit perjury today. And I do believe, though, that you have an enormous amount of issues facing you ahead of you. And it means that your criminal charges are absolutely relevant to us today. Bribery, wire fraud, willfully and knowingly conspiring to commit offenses against the United States. Mayor Adams, you, of course, deny these corruption charges against you. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, Congressman.
Thank you. Now, I understand that you are proven innocent unless you are guilty, but you also have, sir, a trust problem. 4 of your deputy mayors have resigned. Now, this is serious, and Republican prosecutors agree that the evidence against you is ironclad, yet Trump's DOJ moved to drop these charges. Now, I just want to be just really clear and show this here. Now, look at how the Trump-appointed acting U.S. attorney who is prosecuting you described it. Because the law does not support a dismissal, and because I am confident that Adams committed the crimes with which he is charged, I cannot agree to seek a dismissal. Now, this is a conservative Republican who resigned when Donald Trump pressured her to drop the charges. And we know the Trump administration demanded that the charges be dropped. And this is key. They will be able to refile them against you, Mr. Mayor, at any time. I think, personally, that's why you sat next to the architect of family separation on Fox and Friends. Now, Tom Homan sat next to you and said the following, and I quote, "Getting on Rikers Island is step one. we're working on some other things that we don't really want to talk about on open air because the city council will be putting roadblocks up on us. The mayor and me have a commitment to several other things. Now, this was you, of course, and Mr. Homan, the architect of family separation. This is also incredibly concerning, Mr. Mayor. You sat next to him, you smiled, you badmouthed your own city council. Now, Mr. Mayor, we have a right to know if the Trump administration has actually coerced you into agreeing to anything. And Mayor Adams, I also want to be very clear. Are you selling out New Yorkers to save yourself from prosecution?
There's no deal, no quid pro quo, and I did nothing wrong. And anything dealing with this case out of deference to Judge Ho, who's now addressing it, I'm going to refer to his actions.
Well, Mr. Mayor, it appears, to me at least, that you are selling New Yorkers out. It appears that you are working with Tom Homan, who is clearly focused on family separation and deportations and harming New Yorkers and others across the country. Now, every other mayor on this panel is pursuing legal and effective policies that benefit our residents and their communities. Their policies actually uphold public safety. Now, I personally agree with the majority of New Yorkers and think, Mr. Mayor, that you should resign. You should do the right thing. You should step down and resign today. And with that, I yield back.
Would my friend yield? Would my friend yield?
I yield.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, I want to be really clear. Were you pressured in exchange for the dropping and dismissal of criminal charges in your indictment to cooperate with the Trump administration on all fronts with respect to immigration? Did any such conversation take place?
I think I was extremely clear.
I cannot hear you, sir.
I think I was extremely clear. No quid pro quo, no agreement. I did nothing wrong but serve the people of New York City.
Thank my friend for yielding.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Cloud from Texas.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, witnesses, for being here. You know, we are indeed a nation of immigrants. I have to look no further than my own children, who are the inheritance of both my ancestors who got here in the 1600s with William Penn, or my wife who got here when we got married. I think that's really what this nation is about. But you are not here today because of legal immigration. You are here because of illegal migrants who have been sent to our country. In your opening statements, there was a deft linguistic shell game that you played to try to conflate legal immigration with people who are coming here illegally. And we're savvy to that. You are here because each of you, with the exception of Mr. Adams, have said in some form or fashion that you will not honor ICE detainers. In other words, that when you have people in custody and ICE says, we need to come arrest that person because they're here illegally, that we will not honor that. That's why you're here. No one's asking you to go round up criminal aliens. We are asking you to take people who are already in your custody and hand them over to legal federal law enforcement. Now, what this does is it saves U.S. taxpayer money. It keeps from a greater presence of ICE and federal law enforcement in your communities, because if you're releasing them, it takes more people, as Chairman Jordan mentioned, to go in and to re-arrest that person, and it puts the lives of law enforcement in danger. This used to be a bipartisan issue. As a matter of fact, groups like the Cato Institute called President Obama the deporter-in-chief. And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to submit for the record a Cato article that said President Obama, deporter-in-chief, is the title of it. So why we have to ask is suddenly the left not embracing policies that Obama supported. We can look to last night, where it seems to be Trump derangement syndrome, where the left could not seem to applaud kids fighting cancer, a first lady, an accomplished immigrant in her own rights, where traditionally we have applauded and recognized and honored the families for their sacrifice. Many of them are, this is the president's issue, and they're kind of along for the ride. It was odd, I thought, that they applauded sending more money to the Ukraine, but not peace for Ukraine. And so it brings us back to why we're here and why this is a partisan issue all of a sudden. It boggles the mind. Now, Mayor Johnson, you seem to want to talk about Texas, so I'm from Texas. Let's talk about Texas. First of all, have you been to the southern border?
I've been to Texas, but I have not been exactly to the southern border.
Okay. You seem to talk about Governor Abbott and sending buses to your city. Now, I can understand the concern with that, but I will also let you know that Texas did not ask for the Biden administration to open the borders and send an exponential amount of people that have affected your city into our state. And you should know that no one forced them to go to your city. The reason they selected your city is because you have said it's a sanctuary city. Everyone was asked where they wanted to go before they got on the bus. No one asked them to get on the, or told them, forced them to get on the bus. They did it of their own free will, and they were sent to your city because of your stated claim to be a sanctuary city. Now, one thing I could tell you, having toured the facilities, is that I've been to those facilities under the Biden administration where there was a map on the wall, and you could see the migrants kind of pointing out which city they wanted to go to. And I can also tell you, from having been through the immigration process with my wife, there's a difference between people coming here legally and then people who are, when I've been at the ceremony where the people are crying with tears as they take the oath of citizenship to come to this country, is far different than people coming across our border, waving the flags, not trying to assimilate into the United States culture, and sometimes bringing crime into our communities. This is an issue. Now, each mayor, I want to ask you, one of the issues recently is how much FEMA dollars have gone to support migrants and hotel rooms in your communities. Mayor Adams, do you know how many FEMA dollars have spent in your city?
$80 million, and I've been to the border, and I saw those maps pointing to New York.
Thank you. Mayor Johnston?
Thank you, Congressman. I know we do have some federal dollars. I'd have to get back to you on the exact amount.
It's roughly 32 million, Mayor, 38 million. Mayor Johnson?
I don't have the exact numbers.
It's 32 million.
I don't have the number. I'd love to know.
29 million. So understandably, citizens are concerned about that, their taxpayer dollars that are supposed to be going to disaster relief for them and their communities going to illegal aliens. Do you agree, each of you, yes or no question, I only have a couple seconds, do you recognize that it is against the law to harbor criminal aliens?
Gentlemen, time's expired, but please answer the question, Mayor Adams.
Yes, reading federal law, correct.
I do recognize that, and we do not do that.
The city of Chicago does not harbor criminals.
Yes, we follow the laws.
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent request.
Proceed.
I would ask to enter into the record two articles. One, talking about President Trump putting mass deportations to the heart of his campaign during the campaign. And just last night, Trump vows to use U.S. military for mass deportations.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank the chair.
Chair recognizes Mr. Frost from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the year is 1969. My abuela, Zenaida, my grandma, Yaya, gets a call. And her, my mother, Maritza, my aunt, Sandra, and my grandpa, Pepe, have to go to a plane within 24 hours because they've been approved to come to the United States. They came here as refugees in 1969 during the freedom flights from Cuba for their new life in accordance with the promise of this nation. ICE arrested hundreds of U.S. citizens during Trump's first term. Again, in the last few weeks, ICE has detained Native Americans, a teenage girl from Nicaragua, Puerto Ricans, a Puerto Rican military veteran, all legal residents, but all who fit the description. I bet someone like my grandma would have fit the description too. Maybe even myself. Trump's border czar went on TV and raged about Americans studying up on their constitutional rights during interactions with ICE agents. It was one of the most despicable things I've seen. And the question is, why is he so upset that people know their constitutional rights? To the point where this administration has moved to try to intimidate members of Congress for trying to educate their constituents to know their rights. Why don't they want people to know their rights? Well, because if we know what our rights are, we'll also know when Trump tries to take them away. Mr. Beer, why are such outbursts from this administration alarming as threats to our rights and liberties?
Well, you think about what we've heard about detainer requests. I have documented over 155 U.S. citizens who've been targeted by detainer requests, and they want to say, we're going to just take the discretion away from state and local governments over detainer requests, even in the case where someone is clearly a U.S. citizen. Here's my birth certificate. doesn't matter. They're going to disregard it. And so, yes, I am well aware of the threat this administration poses to constitutional rights.
So from what we see the last few weeks, should American citizens, should people with legal permanent residence in this country be also scared of this mass deportation campaign for themselves and their own children?
Oh, absolutely. The birthright citizenship order is the most egregious, but that doesn't stop there. They want to take away people's citizenship and people's rights, regardless whether they're citizens or not.
Thank you. Mayor Wu, Boston has been named the 9th best city for quality of life in the entire country. Congratulations.
I would argue with that.
Okay. If Trump succeeds in forcing you to redirect your city's budget and personnel to help with ICE raids in this mass deportation campaign, how would that affect quality of life for your people?
First, that is against the laws in Boston and in Massachusetts, but I've heard from so many community members, including residents who are immigrants who are citizens, that they are terrified. And that means when people don't feel comfortable reaching out to call 911 when they need help, when survivors of domestic violence don't feel comfortable reporting or giving information, it makes all of us less safe, even those who aren't immigrants.
This culture of fear is bad for the safety of our people. Donald Trump's immigration raids are also traumatizing and destabilizing, of course, all Americans, but especially children and kids. Being a kid in America is hard enough. Making good grades, going through more school shooter drills and fire drills, and now Trump wants to send armed ICE agents into their classrooms to rip children from the school desk as they're trying to learn. Mayor Johnston, my colleagues are laughing about that. I don't find that funny. What would a school day be like for a kid in your city when ICE suddenly bangs down on the door and abruptly grabs their teacher or one of their friends?
Thank you, sir. I was a teacher and I was a school principal before I did this job, so I knew that our school was often the safest place that kids came, and they knew there they could learn, they could get support, they get access to services. And many of our kids come from mixed status families. They don't know their status, they don't know their mom's status or their dad's status. So I've had families before who have pulled their kids out of school, kids who were citizens, because they were worried that somehow their kids were in danger because they didn't know who was being taken. And so for us, the fastest way to make a city unsafe is to have kids not feel safe in their own schools.
See, they want everybody to live in fear of undocumented people. That is what they want to do. But I'll tell you, when I'm in my district and I do roundtables, I've done them with kids in elementary school, and I ask them what they want us to do. They want us to ban assault weapons. They say what they're actually scared of is being shot to death and dying in their schools. And because of actions that the Democratic administration took, the Biden administration with Congress, gun violence has gone down in Denver, 24%, 25% in Chicago, 40% down homicides in Boston. This works. Gun violence went up 45% under Trump. So when they're in charge, more people die. When they're in charge, we are actually less safe. And I think that's an important thing that we all have to keep in mind as they try to scare us in terms of immigrants who are living in this country. Thank you, and I yield back.
Chair recognizes Mr. Palmer from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the witnesses for being here. I just want to respond about crimes committed by people here illegally. Every crime committed by someone in the United States illegally is a crime that would not have been committed. Lincoln Riley, Ruby Garcia, Rachel Morin, Joycelyn Nungaray, the woman set on fire in the New York subway. These are all assaults, rapes, murders, and other crimes that would not have taken the lives of these people if those people were not here illegally. They were given safe harbor. Now, I want to ask you something. You all took an oath of office. Mr. Adams, did you swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States?
Yes, I do.
How about you, Mayor Johnson?
Yes, sir, I did.
How about you, the other Mayor Johnson?
Yeah, the Constitution of the United States as well as the Constitution of Illinois.
Okay, and Mayor,
Yes.
you did. Are you familiar with the Supremacy Clause? Any of you?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay. Then under the Supremacy Clause, you understand that the laws of the United States take precedent over the laws of Colorado, over the laws of Illinois, over the laws of Massachusetts, and your cities. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir, I do.
But when you declared your cities sanctuary cities, you did so illegally. Do you understand that?
Respectfully, sir, I would disagree with that. We follow
You're
every
disagreeing
federal
with
law.
the law. It's against the law to give sanctuary to people who have committed felonies, and it's a felony to cross the border illegally. You gave sanctuary to people who are here illegally, you violated your oath to uphold the Constitution. Because of the supremacy clause, the laws of the United States take preference. But you didn't do that.
There is, thank you, sir. There's no part of our city law that violates federal law, no part of the practices or services we provided that violate federal law.
Did you personally violate the law then by giving sanctuary? Somebody gave these people sanctuary. You declared your city, city of Boston was declared a sanctuary city by you, Mayor.
Being a sanctuary city as you describe it, or being a city as we describe it, that's home for everyone, it means that if you commit a crime, you are held accountable
to people who are
regardless of
here
immigration
illegally,
status.
and when you interfere with the officers of the law who are there to even remove people that you know have committed crimes, you have violated your oath of office. You've committed a crime. Mr. Chairman, I don't understand why we haven't been discussing obstruction of justice. I mean, get real about this. We have a problem in the country with the people who have come here illegally. And I just gave you a few names of people who have been raped and murdered. There are numerous others. There's a whole organization established called Remembrance to remember the people who have been assaulted, raped, murdered in this country, because certain cities, certain officials decided to give sanctuary to people who came here illegally and committed these crimes. It goes all the way back to Kate Steinle, San Francisco, shot by someone who was here illegally. She would still be alive today. She died in the arms of her father. So again, I want to know if you understand the supremacy clause, that the laws of the United States are supreme over whatever your opinions might be of what the laws are.
Sir, I do recognize that. We do follow that. I want to clarify that we actively, aggressively pursue any known criminal in the city, and we actually partner with federal government to do that. If there is someone with a criminal warrant, we're searching for them. We have federal task forces we're partners of to break up gang activity. We do that for drug trafficking. We do that on armed robberies. So we are in partnership with the federal government on many issues around.
Mayor Adams is being attacked because he's agreed to cooperate with federal officials to uphold the laws of the United States. I haven't heard any of you in defense of that.
We are absolutely upholding the laws of the United States. We do it every day, and we will continue to do it.
I just think we need to do a deeper dive into this, Mr. Chairman. If it were up to me, I mean, I'd be considering referring charges. I think we've got a problem here when we decide that there's some laws that we will obey and some laws that we won't. I don't care who it is, Republican, Democrat, I don't care what office you hold. We need to abide by the laws passed by.
Will the gentleman yield?
No, I will not yield. Mr. Chairman, I thank you for the time. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. We're going to have two more. We're going to have two more questioners. Then we're going to have to take a break at the request of the witnesses, a 15-minute break, maybe 20 if we need that. But Chair recognizes Mr. Kassar, and after him, then Mr. Higgins, and we'll proceed with the break. But Chair recognizes Mr. Kassar.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mayor Wu, can you tell us a little bit, just maybe 20 seconds, about how your administration has helped address unemployment, especially amongst youth in your city, which we know is a risk when we have high levels of young people unemployed?
We made a commitment, our mayor's guarantee, that any young person in the Boston Public Schools who wanted a paid summer job would get one, and we fulfilled that with the partnership of businesses and companies and organizations throughout the city. Record numbers participating.
Thank you, Mayor Wu. Mayor Johnson, can you tell us a little bit about measures your office has implemented to address the root causes of violence in Chicago?
Thank you for that question. Yes, so first of all, it's great to report that violence is down in the city of Chicago, and it has gone down since I've been in office as a result of a couple of measures. One, we've reopened 3 mental health clinics because we do know that mental health issues, and we are in a very severe mental health crisis. We've also increased the number of youth employment. We have hired almost 28,000 young people for last summer. This year, we have an opportunity to hire up to 29,000 young people. We've also built more homes. Just last year, we've appropriated $11 billion, 37,000 construction jobs in the works for almost 10,000 more affordable units, and we have promoted and hired 200 detectives to increase trust between community and law enforcement to solve the crimes that do occur in our city.
Thank you so much. Mayors, I want to thank you for the hard work you're doing every single day. Just in 40 seconds, you have described building tens of thousands of homes for people that need them, hiring detectives to solve cold cases, building community trust to reduce violence, hiring people to do incredible mental health work, and reducing the youth unemployment rate. That is so much more than what the Republican majority can ever describe having ideas about. And that's why they've dragged you before us today. They want to point the finger at you because they have no plan on how to address housing, no plan on how to reduce costs, no plan on how to actually reduce violence in our communities. In fact, maybe some of the only plans they have would be to make those issues worse. And I know that you all as mayors are doing one of the hardest jobs in this country every single day. You're serving your communities honorably. And they don't want the American people to hear about how Boston has drastically dropped your unemployment rate. They don't want the American people to hear about how Chicago is dropping the rate of violence in the city. But our job is to make sure the American people actually hear the truth. And the truth is that you are pairing a law enforcement response along with a mental health response and a housing response and a jobs response to what's going on in your cities. And that is so critical. Republicans, on the other hand, here are going back to the same old tactic, which is to say, find a vulnerable group of people and let's blame them for everything that we can. Anything bad that happens, let's go try to point the finger at our political opponents or at a vulnerable person or at a person of color from a faraway place. And that doesn't actually solve real issues for the American people. Republicans and their big boss donors blame immigrants for low wages because they don't want the American people to see the Republican plan to dismantle the NLRB, to dismantle unions, and to never pass a bill raising wages for American workers. They blame immigrants for housing costs because the Republicans are dismantling the Department of Housing and Urban Development and stripping affordable housing funding from this country. They want to distract from the $8 million a day that people like Elon Musk get in federal contracts while they attack hardworking immigrants and while they attack officials that are actually just trying to do their jobs. Mayor Johnson, you have a limited number, I suppose, of jail cells in Cook County and a limited number of law enforcement resources. Is that correct?
That is correct, and I do not have jurisdiction over Cook County jails.
And you want to make sure that when somebody in the city of Chicago calls 911, that they get an appropriate response. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And so what I have been hearing all morning from my Republican colleagues is they want the federal government to go tell the city of Denver or the city of Boston or the city of Chicago. No, they want the federal government to be able to call you and take over your police resources or take over your county's jail resources, and you don't even represent the county, for whatever case they might come up with, whether the person's dangerous or not. Instead of having cities determine if somebody is dangerous and needs to be held, instead of having cities say, we want to make sure if you have an emergency that we get somebody to you and don't just send out our police to a call that may not be a priority just because somebody in the federal government wants to go after somebody with no criminal background and that isn't a threat. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, right before I yield back, I just want to thank people that are involved in local government, city council members, neighborhood associations, mayors, the people who keep our cities running. You deserve our support in making your cities more safe. You deserve our support.
Gentlemen,
in
time's
addressing
expired.
housing
Chair recognizes
instead of
Mr.
hearing like
Higgins
this.
from
I yield
Louisiana.
back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's clarify for America. Mayor Adams, Mayor Johnson, and Mayor Wu, are you here today under the advice of council, and do you have council present? Yes or no?
I want to understand the question.
Are you here today under the advice of council, And do you have counsel present?
Do have counsel present. I'm here because we were requested to appear.
Did you consult with, did you have counsel prior to your appearance?
Yes, we did.
Thank you. This is not a trap question. We just want to clarify.
Okay.
Here under the advice of counsel, do you have counsel present?
Yes, sir.
Mayor Johnson,
Council present here because I was invited.
did you counsel before your trip here?
We do have counsel,
Get
but I was
advice
here.
from your counsel?
Yes.
Okay, then you're under the advice of counsel.
Yes.
Mayor Wu, thank you. To just clarify for America, these mayors are all sanctuary city mayors. But the narrative is no longer comfortable because 3 months ago, we were at the tail end of 4 years of millions and millions of illegals coming into our country. It was out of control. The only thing that has happened since then is we had an election in November. And now we're not pulling the curtain back. We have ripped the curtain from the rods. We have revealed to America just how fast we could have secured our border if you had an executive that was willing to enforce the law. So now we're paying attention to our municipalities. And every one of them is lawyered up. They've changed their narrative. We got example after example. The mayor of Chicago, we must lead with and live by the promise of sanctuary city. The mayor of Denver, willing to go to jail in defense of sanctuary city policy. The list goes on. But the policies of these mayors and our previous president have consequences, real life consequences. I have a family here today, Mr. Chairman, who lost their beautiful loved one. This young man was killed by an illegal immigrant in Texas that never should have been in our country. He'll never be here to raise his daughter, Anne Marie, to love and cherish and honor and uphold his beautiful wife, Olivia. And you mayors have responsibility, not just to your communities and the citizens you just want to serve, but by extension to the entire republic. And let me clarify, I was a cop for a long time. To honor the jurisdictional authority of another law enforcement agency, you do it every day in your city. Guaranteed, every one of you, if you have an inmate in your city on city charges, and that inmate has a felony warrant from a neighboring county or another county in your state, and that county contacts your city while you have that inmate in detention, and ask you to hold them for them to come pick it up upon release, guaranteed you release that inmate to the county over or to your state police. But you're not doing it for ICE. And ICE is responsible to remove millions of criminal, hard-edged, criminal illegals from our country. And we've had enough. America's fed up with this betrayal of oath, and you'll be held accountable. One of you said you're willing to go to jail. We might give you that opportunity, good mayor. One of my colleagues mentioned the children. I always want to talk to the children, separation of children. At any given time in America, there's 750 to 850,000 American citizen parents of minor children incarcerated in our country. If you commit a felony in America, you get arrested and prosecuted and convicted and incarcerated, you can expect to be separated from your children. But let me say, there's a sunset to that separation, because when you do your time, you'll be released. You can return to your family. This young man will never return to his family, and he should have never been removed from his family. If we had a president and heads of our municipalities that were willing to uphold the federal law that exists. America is moving into a new era of enforcement of our own laws. Welcome to it. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Very good.
Mr. Chair, I have unanimous consent.
All right.
This is an article from Wired. It is February 18th of 2025. U.S. funding cuts are helping criminals get away with child abuse and human trafficking. Services supporting victims of online child exploitation
Without
and
objection,
trafficking.
so ordered.
Thank you so much.
At the request of the witnesses, the committee will take a 20-minute break pursuant to the previous order. The chair declares the committee.
And so we need everyone to feel secure in their communities, like they can reach out, they can call 911 when they need help. And in our city, those laws actually help Boston police solve crimes.
Thank you. Mr. Beer, question for you. I'd always thought that my Republican colleagues were strong supporters of state and local sovereignty and were against intrusion from the federal government. Do you think this lawsuit seems consistent with that position?
Oh, absolutely not. If you look at the Supreme Court precedent on this, it came from a gun control law that said that state and local governments had to cooperate with the federal government on gun control. The Supreme Court said that's unconstitutional. Not a single member on this side, I believe, would be against that Supreme Court decision.
Mm-hmm. There is nothing illegal about protecting people's constitutional rights and due process, education, and equal treatment under the law. But it is illegal for the federal government to withhold federal dollars that these cities' taxpayer dollars have gone towards. Mayor Johnson, Chicago ranks as one of the largest cities in the U.S. and has the third largest metropolitan economy, boasting a GDP of $860 million. This makes it one of the most economically diverse cities in the nation, correct?
That is correct.
Would it be fair to say that your city generates billions in taxpayer revenue and that the average taxpayer in Chicago and Illinois contributes more than around $20,000 in federal income taxes, which is more than $1,310 above the national average?
That is absolutely correct.
So can we conclude that Chicago residents pay significantly more in taxes than they receive in return, contributing at least $5 in taxes for every $1 they get back in federal support?
More than our fair share.
Thank you. Only 9 states have taxpayers that contribute more to the federal government than they receive. All 4 of our mayors are from states on that list. Yet Republicans are saying that they should lose that money because they don't agree with their dear leader. Trump and Republicans are attempting to take money from blue cities and blue states and give them to their red states. Republicans too often demonize blue areas and cities that are the very areas that are keeping the economy going. The attacks we've heard on mayors today are not only shameful, they're dangerous capitulations to the impulses of this president who is trying to expand executive power in nearly every direction. I'd like to thank our mayors, Wu, Johnson, and Johnston for coming in today, having the strength of courage to stand up to this administration. Thank you. I yield back.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Biggs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mayor Adams, you've agreed today. Sorry, over here. You've agreed today that New York City is a sanctuary city. Is that right?
Based on the definitions, and there doesn't seem, Congressman, there's now a uniform definition of that. But yes,
right. But that's what you've proclaimed, Mayor Johnston. You've previously also declared that you're a sanctuary city. Mayor Johnson, you said that Chicago must lead with and live by the promise to be a sanctuary city. Mayor Wu, you said Boston Police and other departments cannot cooperate with ICE when it comes to detaining on civil warrants. Of course, I don't know what Mayor Johnston would define it, but I do know that the Honorable Mayor Johnson from Chicago, they call theirs a welcoming city ordinance, and we've got Ms. Wu, Mayor Wu, who's referred to hers as a safe city. That's really interesting to me. So when you are a sanctuary city, you put limits on how much you're willing to cooperate with federal agencies' efforts to remove illegal aliens. And your policies are then contravene federal law. You just do. Under Title VIII of the U.S. Code, it says a federal, state, or local government entity or official may not prohibit or in any way restrict any government entity or official from sending to or receiving from the Immigration Naturalization Service any information regarding the citizenship or immigration status of any individual. Yeah, so when I look at your guys' ordinances, and I got them all up here, and they're really interesting stuff, and Denver, I think you testified previously that you rely on the statutory section, am I right, of the state statute. So let's just review this. There is a distinction And some of you have made that. Mayor Johnson of Chicago made this repeatedly, and Mayor Wu of Boston did. There's a distinction between criminal warrant, and you say we cooperate on criminal warrant, but there's two levels of cooperation at least. There's a communication level, and there's a passing the person off. That's one level with the criminal. But the civil level, this is what I want to talk about for a second, because all of these ordinances proscribe communication and transfer of someone where there's a civil warrant. Now, I know that all of you understand that a removal order is a civil order. And that means none of you and none of your agencies within your municipalities are communicating or passing over someone where there's a ICE removal detainer. So I don't care how many times, 1,226 or whatever it was in 7 years, I don't care how many times you do it, but if you're not doing it for civil orders, then you're allowing people who have a removal order, who've had due process, because that's how you get a removal order. You're allowing them to stay in the country. You're in violation of this law right here. You are. You're in violation of that law right there. And you've got to start realizing what your criminal culpability is on that. And that's really what we're talking about here. So, you don't think that's harboring, perhaps? But let's take a look at that next statute, please. That next federal statute. In conducting investigations and hearings, immigration officers and administrative law judges shall have reasonable access to examine evidence of any person or entity being investigated. If you're holding someone back, even if it's under a civil warrant, because that's what you said you're not going to participate in, and you are preventing access to that person or evidence, you're in violation of this. You have criminal culpability under this. And you'll notice there's no mens rea requirement here. This is it. Every one of you is exposed to criminal culpability here. That's the reality of it. Let's do the next one. Any person who knowing that a person is an alien, knowing or in reckless disregard, now you got a culpable mental state here, of the fact that an alien has come to, entered, or remains in the United States in violation of law, conceals, harbors, or shields from detection, or attempts to conceal, harbor, or shield from detection, such alien in any place. You'll notice it doesn't make a distinction that all of y'all want to make of criminal warrants versus civil. You're all in violation of all three of these statutes. You got criminal culpability. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Ms. Randall from Washington State.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for taking the time to be here today. You know, I represent the northwest corner of the country, though I did happily live in Boston for 10 years safely. And Washington State is proudly home to more than 1 million immigrants. We know in Washington that our communities, like yours, are stronger because of immigrants. We are fed because of immigrants. We're able to take public transportation because of the work of immigrants. We are able to work on building the affordable housing that we need because of immigrants. We receive quality health care because of immigrants. But this administration, as we see over and over and over, is more concerned with deporting families than supporting families. Their actions are rooted in hatred and fear and deliberate misunderstanding. They say they want to lower costs, but what their actions show us is the opposite. Immigrants drive our economy. And this administration's mass deportations have disrupted small businesses, wreaked havoc on our communities, all while families see their grocery bills continue to rise and worry about their health care being ripped away. My constituents are scared. They're writing to us that they're afraid to go out in public, send their kids to school, go to the grocery store without two other members of their family or their neighbors with them. There are dozens of families making emergency plans to make sure someone is legally designated to take care of their children if they're detained or deported. And in fact, our governor had to create additional policy to ensure that kids are not left alone when their parents disappear. We've heard from beet farmers and wheat growers and florists, Christmas tree farms, grocers, and salal harvesters that their businesses cannot continue without the support of immigrants. We know that there is a huge economic impact to our families and our communities. And Mayor Adams, per your testimony in 2021 on immigrant New Yorkers, you stated that including those who are undocumented, immigrants in New York paid billions of dollars in taxes and contributed billions more in spending power to the New York economy. Is that true?
Oh, yes.
Yes, thank you. So one can imagine if this administration continues its mass deportation plans in cities across the country, including New York, it would have a significant impact on all our economies. Mr. Breyer, can you speak to what the economic impacts of mass deportation would mean for the U.S. economy?
Absolutely, it'd be devastating. You're looking at an instant recession if it was, some magic wand you could wave to get rid of all these people like they want. That'd be about a 7% drop in GDP. That's well into the trillions of dollars in lost production of goods and services that benefit Americans. And when you really think about it, when it comes to the cities, right, it's not equally distributed across the country. It's really these cities and some others that are going to be overwhelmingly impacted. So those neighborhoods, you're looking at a death spiral of economic activity when you remove so much of the population. And of course, we talk about just the people who are undocumented, but their children, their spouses, all those people are going to be affected by mass deportation.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Chair, with unanimous consent, I'd like to enter this New York Times article, "Frustration Grows Inside the White House Over Pace of Deportations."
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you so much. And, this committee has been very interested in uncovering waste, fraud, and abuse. And I'd like to draw our attention to the ASMR deportation flight that the administration touted on their official social media channels. While previous flights, deportation flights, cost for about 10.5 hours, $47,000. This military flight that was commandeered from its mission of national security to take folks who were in detention centers already to a stopover in Guantanamo cost us $299,250 for the same flight. My folks in my community who are stationed at Joint Base Lewis McChord are being diverted from their essential missions to go to Guantanamo to be layover stewardesses for this this plan that's just for clicks. It's just to continue to stir up media. It's just to deliver on a promise that the president made and that he's worried that he will be accused of letting his base down if he doesn't carry out. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Ms. Mace from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All of the mayors here today are actively working to harm the American people you represent. You all have blood on your hands. I'm going to ask a series of yes or no questions today, and I would like to remind all of you, you are under oath. I only want a yes or a no to my questions. My first question, do you acknowledge breaking into our country is a crime? Mayor Adams, yes or no? Do you acknowledge breaking into our country is a crime?
I acknowledge.
Yes or no?
I acknowledge.
Okay, Honorable Johnson, he's not going to answer the question. Yes or no? Is breaking into our country against the law? Yes or no?
Depends how you cross the border.
Okay,
Some folks
Mayor
have
Johnson,
status.
yes or no?
Comprehensive immigration
not an
reform
answer.
policies
Mayor
are what's
Wu?
necessary in this
Mayor Wu,
moment.
do you have a better answer than these gentlemen before you? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, do you believe it's acceptable for illegals who commit heinous crimes be released back into the public instead of being detained and deported? Mayor Adams, yes or no?
Anyone break a crime?
Yes or no? This is not hard. Yes or no?
Anyone that break a crime should be detained.
Okay, Mayor. Yes or no?
They should be deported.
Okay, Mayor.
Any individual that
Yes or no?
causes harm
Yes or no?
and breaks the
Okay,
law
Mayor Wu?
should be held accountable.
This is why you have 6% approval rating, because you suck at answering questions. Mayor Wu? Yes or no?
Anyone who's a public safety threat should be prosecuted.
All right, I have my next question. When an illegal alien rapes a woman, do you believe you're on the right side of history? Mayor Adams, yes or no?
Can we say that question again?
Okay, Mayor Johnston. When an illegal alien rapes a woman, do you believe you're on the right side of history? Yes or no?
I will charge and prosecute them.
Yes or no? Okay, well, okay. You said you would go to jail, didn't you?
I will
For
charge and
harboring illegal
prosecute
aliens or something, Mayor Johnson?
Could you repeat your question, please?
When an illegal alien rapes a woman, do you believe you're on the right side of history?
Could you clarify that question?
Okay, Mayor Wu, yes or no?
No, rape is obviously
Then
horrible.
why are you letting rapists back out onto the streets of Boston?
That is not true. That is
Okay.
not what's happening in
when
Boston.
When an illegal alien molests a kid, molests an underage kid, do you pat yourself on the back for being compassionate? Mayor Adams?
It's despicable, and he should be arrested.
Mayor Johnston?
I prosecute folks that commit crimes like that.
You guys let him out on the streets. Mayor Johnson?
We arrest violent criminals in the city of Chicago.
Mayor Wu?
We investigate, arrest, and prosecute.
You guys don't sound very confident today. Would your city honor an ICE detainer on an illegal alien who rapes kids if one was issued today? Mayor Adams? Yes or no?
In conformance with law, we will honor detainers.
Mayor Johnson?
If there's a criminal warrant, we'll help them pick them up. If there's no criminal warrant, we'll honor a notification request.
Mayor Johnson?
Criminal warrants, we always cooperate with federal agents with a criminal warrant.
Mayor Wu?
Get a criminal warrant, we will enforce.
A criminal warrant. I'm talking about an ICE detainer on an individual who's here illegal who rapes kids. Do you all hate Donald Trump more than you love your country? Mayor Adams?
I respect my president. I respect my
Yes
country.
or no?
and I
You're having the
respect
hardest time
my
today.
Senate.
Mayor Johnston?
I love my country.
Yes or no?
I love my
Okay.
country.
Mayor Johnson?
As the son of a pastor, I love everyone and this country.
Mayor Wu?
I love my country and my city.
Do you all, are you all willing to go to jail for violating federal law? Mayor Adams?
I'm not going to violate federal law, so I don't have to worry about that.
Mayor Johnston?
We don't violate federal law either.
You don't violate federal law.
We do not violate federal law.
Is it violating federal law if you don't honor detainer requests from ICE?
Absolutely not. In fact, the statute Congressman Biggs shared, we explicitly follow. The statute says you cannot prohibit city employees from sharing information about someone's status with the government. We do not prohibit that.
Do you love illegal aliens more than you love your fellow countrymen?
I love all the residents of the city and county.
Mayor Johnston, are you willing to go to jail for violating federal law?
The city of Chicago complies with all laws.
Oh, I highly doubt that. Mayor Wu?
We are not violating federal law.
Mayor Wu, I have a last couple questions for you. Do you believe that ICE arresting a child rapist, quote, threatens everyone's safety, end quote? Yes or no?
No.
Does ICE arresting a murderous MS-13 gang member threaten everyone's safety? Yes or no?
No.
I would like to hold up this quote of you where you say, ICE's efforts actually threaten the safety of everyone, end quote, Boston Mayor Michelle Wu. You're a hypocrite. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Chair recognizes
Mr. Chairman, I have unanimous consent
Subramaniam.
request. Mr. Chairman, I have unanimous consent request.
Proceed.
I'd like to seek unanimous consent to enter into the record this article, and I'll do this as a survivor of sexual violence myself. This is from Courts, March 2018.
Without objection, so ordered.
Data from Texas shows that U.S.-born
Without objection, so ordered. We've put it in the record.
I haven't entered it.
You have what?
Mr. Chair, can I have several articles. I need to enter them. Let me just go ahead with what the articles are, what they speak to.
What's the next article?
Let me proceed. Data from Texas shows that U.S.-born Americans
that is
commit
not-
more rape
Especially,
and murder than immigrants.
Listen, this trend of you
Data
all
from
trying to get
Texas
thrown out of
shows
committee
that
so you can get on
US-born
MSNBC
Americans
is going to
commit
end.
more
We're not
rape.
going to put up with it.
This is
Chair
my
recognizes
procedural
Mr.
right as a
Subramaniam.
member of this committee
You can
to
go.
enter documents
You can go with
into the
Mr.
record.
Frost and Mr.
I'm
Green.
reclaiming my time.
That's
you
what
do
you
not
want.
get to
No.
dictate
Ms. Presley,
how
I've been
I
very.
recite the
I have
articles
been very
for the
accommodating
record.
to you, Mr. Subramaniam.
And I
Start
take
the
particular
clock.
umbrage
Start
as a
the clock.
survivor
No, I
of
don't.
sexual violence.
Go.
I will enter
Order.
into the record. This is my right. Thank you.
No. It is Mr. Subramaniam.
Mr. Chair,
No, you know the process of unanimous consent. You are not
I have
recognized.
several articles to enter into the record.
Mr. Subramaniam, if you don't go, we're going to recognize Mr. Timmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to bring up a bill that's going to be before the floor, HR 32, a bill that would basically take away federal grants if the administration thinks you are a, quote, sanctuary city, which, by the way, isn't even very well defined. I'm not even sure from reading the bill whether your cities are even sanctuary cities to begin with. I think that's why that question may have been difficult for you to answer. Well, I think what's been very interesting to hear is how well you've been able to integrate and welcome immigrants into your communities, into your city's economies, and making the best out of a difficult situation. I find that very impressive. And but I wonder to the mayors here, Mr. Johnston, if you took away federal grants, how would that affect public safety of your city? Would that improve? Would that make your city more safe or less safe if we took away federal grants from your city?
It would dramatically weaken public safety. I mean, we wouldn't be able to repair bridges that are falling apart. It means we wouldn't be able to put kids in preschool or give veterans medical care. It would be catastrophic.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, the same question. Mayor Johnson, the same question.
It would certainly undermine all of the investments that we've made thus far. Since I've been mayor, we've provided $20 billion of new investments that contribute to the overall safety of the city of Chicago.
Mayor Wu, same question. Would this make your city of Boston more safe or less safe?
Withdrawing federal funds would make us less safe. Education makes us more safe. Housing makes us more safe, and we rely on those funds.
And how did, let's take Mayor Johnston, how did many of the immigrants come to your city? You mentioned they came from Texas, is that right?
That's correct, Congressman. They came on buses sent from Texas, mostly from El Paso.
I feel like we have the wrong people in the room today. We have mayors of cities that are trying to do their best with the situation that they have, and then we have governors in Texas and Florida who are busing folks up to your cities, and so you're trying to make the best out of this situation, but somehow they're trying to make our immigration system worse, in essence, because they're taking the folks that come over to their states and they're spreading them across the country, and you're just trying to deal with that situation. Would you characterize it as that, Mayor Johnston?
Yes, sir. We're just trying to manage the crisis in front of us, which is families being dropped off on our city streets in the winter with no clothes. Our calling is to make sure they're safe.
And how would the Trump administration's funding freezes and cuts, would they undermine public safety in your city, Mayor Johnston?
They could dramatically undermine public safety in our city. Everything again.
Mayor Johnson, same question.
It certainly will undermine community safety if the
Mayor
federal
Wu,
government
same
undermines
question.
the investments in people of Chicago.
It would undermine our safety, too.
So we're trying to make your cities more safe, but there's a bill here in the name of making your cities more safe actually makes your cities less safe. Would you agree with that, Mayor Johnson?
Yes, sir, I would.
Mayor Johnson, same
Yes.
question. Mayor Wu,
Yes.
same question. And I think this bill is actually, in a way, extortion, because you're basically trying to take away funding from a city if they don't do what the administration wants you to do. But let's talk about extortion for a minute. Mayor Adams, I think everyone's a little bit concerned about the timeline of events that has led to your case being dropped. And so, Mayor Adams, did you meet with Tom Homan on December 12th of last year?
Yes, I did.
Did President Trump say publicly that he considered pardoning you 4 days after that meeting? Yes or no?
I don't recall what the president said in regards to that meeting.
Well, he did. In January, did you meet with President Trump at Mar-a-Lago? Yes or no?
Yes, I did.
In this meeting, did you talk about immigration enforcement with the president?
Talk about immigration in general.
What was that? What did you talk about when it comes to immigration?
just how important it is to secure the border, and they were able to do so. We saw a 90% decrease, and I see that on my streets every day.
Did you talk about your pending case with the DOJ?
No, I did not.
So the case did not come out. Have you ever talked about your case with the DOJ with the president?
No more than what you heard him on the trail say that he thought it was important.
I haven't heard much. Tell me, have you ever talked about the president, talked about your case in the DOJ with the president?
Yeah, as I indicated previously, I'm going to say it again. This case is in front of Judge Ho, and out of deference to him.
Have you ever talked about your case with anyone in the Trump administration?
I'm going to say this again. This case is in front of Judge Ho, and out of deference to Judge Ho, he is going to determine the outcome of this case.
That's not answering the question. I'm going to ask you one more time. Have you ever talked about this case with anyone in the Trump administration?
This case is in front of Judge Ho, and out of deference to Judge Ho is going to decide the outcome of this case.
I think Mayor Adams is not answering the question because he probably has. And I think there's a pretty clear timeline here that indicates that a case is being dropped in the name of trying to appease the president, who seems to be okay with what's going on. And so look, we can talk about the policy, but I think there's a bigger problem here of public extortion and almost an endorsement of this extortion, and it's becoming the norm for this administration. I yield back.
Chair recognizes Mr. Timmons from South Carolina.
Mr. Chairman, before you do, I have a unanimous consent request, please.
Mr. Spansbury, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 4 articles I would like to enter into the record titled "The Mythical Tie Between Immigration and Crime. Undocumented immigrants half as likely to be arrested for violent crimes. Immigrants significantly less likely to commit crimes," and one titled "Showing Data About U.S.-Born Citizens More Likely to Commit Murder." And Mr. Chairman, I do ask that you do respect my colleagues on this side of the aisle, parliamentary.
Without objection, so ordered. Your unanimous consents are put into the record, and only titles are required. And once you start filibustering, you become out of order.
I am not filibustering.
I'm just saying the last member on your
that
side was filibustering.
She was not. She had
Yes, she
more
was.
articles
And now you're
than
filibustering. Chair
Mr.
recognizes
Chairman.
Mr. Timmons from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to speak directly to all 4 of the mayors. Y'all did the best you could with bad situations. You did. The former president let in, I don't even know what number to use. Some places use 8 million, some people use 16, 20, whatever the number is. And so each of you had an influx of illegal immigrants into your cities, and you have federal, state, and local statutes that you have to deal with, and an untenable situation was created. I want to go one by one. Mayor Adams, how many illegal immigrants were present in New York City in the last 4 years? How many people did you have to deal with?
230,000.
All right, so, and that's 230,000 people that were using your limited resources that American citizens are entitled to, but you were actually required under local ordinance or under state law to provide services to them. They're not supposed to be here. They're not supposed to be here because we have borders. Borders are supposed to matter. Mayor Johnston, how many illegal immigrants did you have to deal with over the last 4 years?
Thank you, sir. We had 42,000 newcomers arrive over.
42,000. Mayor Johnson, how many illegal immigrants did you have to deal with over the last 4 years?
Over the last 4 years, there were roughly 50,000 asylum seekers bused from the state of Texas to the city of Chicago.
And you know why that Texas did that? Because 10, 12, 15 million people were in Texas, and they had to deal with the same problem you did, and they thought it was appropriate that everyone should have to share this burden. Mayor Wu, how many did Boston have over the last 4 years?
We don't ask about immigration status and giving
How many
services,
people
so
that-
I don't have that number.
Okay, well, we'll say at least tens of thousands. So all of you have limited resources, limited tax dollars to spend to serve your community. And there's people that have a disproportionate need, and you have obligations to serve them more if they are struggling, if they do not have income, if they are jobless. So you have limited resources, and all of you had this problem. And we've been saying for the last 4 years that this is all because Joe Biden and his policies were allowing lawlessness at our southern border, which allowed millions of people into this country. Mayor Johnston, did you say anything to the Biden administration? Did you say, we're struggling, we can't make ends meet, we can't serve our citizens because of your open southern border? Did you, Mayor Johnston?
Yes, Congressman, I did reach out to the Biden administration about that.
Did you publicly address this? Did you ever challenge them and say, this is ridiculous, secure the southern border?
What we focused on, sir, was the biggest challenge we were facing was folks needed the right to work. They
I
came to our
couldn't
city.
find anything where you told the Biden administration they are wrong for their border policy. Mayor Johnson, did you publicly attack the President Biden in the last 4 years because he let millions of people into this country and it hurt your constituents? Did you publicly attack him for his policies?
So I publicly called
Did you say secure the damn border? No, you
I
didn't.
publicly called for Congress to pass comprehensive immigration
Okay, we'll get to
reform,
that in a second.
and that
Mayor
did
Wu,
not happen.
Did you ever publicly attack the open border policies of the previous administration?
Congressman, in fact, we hosted the former Secretary of DHS in Boston so that he could see the impact.
To talk
and
about
learn
how we
from
need
our residents.
legislation, I'm sure. Mayor Adams, did you ever publicly attack President Biden for his open border policy?
Yes, in addition to having $7 billion out of our tax base.
Did you see what his administration did to political opponents? Did you see what they did to President Trump? I mean, I guess you're standing up for your people. I admire that. For the last 4 years, I heard how Congress needed to spend tens of billions of dollars to secure the southern border. We had to change policies. We had to do all this nonsense. We didn't need to do any of that. We just needed a new president. Last month, we had the lowest number of border crossings in decades. And I can promise you this, that's going to continue because our president has always had the ability to stop this. And the only one of you that stood up to the previous administration was under investigation shortly thereafter. Weird how that happens. We're turning the page here. Going forward, each of you need to cooperate to the fullest extent of your ability with President Trump, with ICE, with all federal laws to make sure that you can secure your people and stop spending billions of taxpayer dollars on people that do not deserve it. Your constituents deserve those resources, not the people that enter this country illegally. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Ms. Ansari from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. President Trump has talked a big game about how he wants to allegedly make our cities and communities safer. He says he wants to get violent criminals off the streets, and he thinks that mass deportations are the way to do it. He sent ICE and Border Patrol agents after our Native American communities, parents and children, and law-abiding American citizens who are targeted simply because of the color of their skin or the language that they're speaking. The chaos and the fear that this has instilled pits neighbor against neighbor, creates more distrust in law enforcement, and puts us all in danger. Mayor Wu, first of all, congratulations on your baby. What have you been hearing from communities in Boston? Are people fearful of engaging with law enforcement?
In Boston, because our laws are what they are, we have very strong relationships with our community, and that's why we've been able to continue making progress on being the safest major city in the nation. But we do hear that people are afraid of the federal government, and it's including people who are immigrants, but also U.S. citizens. That fear is widespread.
Thank you. Perhaps most disturbing, President Trump has diverted critical Homeland Security investigation agents to work on immigration enforcement. That means they're no longer investigating violent crimes like human trafficking, child pornography, and the flow of fentanyl in our communities, putting our entire country at greater risk. That means fewer violent criminals, pedophiles, and drug runners being apprehended, not more. Once again, Republicans are making life easier for criminals at the expense of victims, actually making our communities less safe. Mr. Beer, question for you. What effect do you think that assigning DHS agents to deportations is going to have on public safety?
Well, it's an extremely negative effect, and it's not just limited to DHS. He's pulling in FBI, ATF, DEA. They're all being diverted off their primary missions to crack down on criminal gangs and criminal organizations in the United States. So it's not just DHS, it's every criminal agency in the United States government is being diverted to mass deportation right now.
The Phoenix police chief has stated, we work with our federal partners all the time to work on criminal issues, not civil immigration issues. That will continue to be the stance of the Phoenix Police Department. I can tell you during my time on the Phoenix City Council, I served on the Public Safety and Justice Subcommittee. I heard constantly from our police force that they are understaffed and need to focus their resources on violent crime. But President Trump has also tried to force municipalities to divert their law enforcement personnel to aid in mass deportations. Diverting city police to deportations would mean that our officers are spending less time investigating murders, rapes, and robberies. Now, I want to shift to the economy. Mayor Wu, would you agree that local leaders and public safety officials who hear directly from constituents about public safety know better what your city needs to focus on than the White House does? And also, are you worried about ICE raids and the impact that it will have for businesses and economic prosperity?
Yes, our local community knows best, and we can tell you in Boston, over our history, it has not been the word of presidents or kings or presidents who think they are kings that set what happens. It is our residents.
And Mr. Beer, can you tell us more on what the economic impacts like food prices and housing costs of mass deportations would be and how this could affect a city like Phoenix?
Well, about half the cost of the fruits and vegetables on your in your grocery store is coming from the labor of immigrants and other workers at our farms. So it's an extremely important component of our agricultural production in the United States. If you look at where these people have gone, they have gone into the sectors where there is no work visa. There is no legal immigration option for employers to hire in these sectors. That is why we had so many people come, because of the labor needs of the United States.
Thank you so much. I truly want to thank the mayors for being here and taking on these ridiculous attacks on our local officials. You know what is best for your communities and the people that you represent. You know better than Donald Trump. You know better than Tom Homan. You know better than Stephen Miller. So thank you so much. And finally, I'd like to request unanimous consent to enter into the record, first, a report published by the American Immigration Council titled Mass Deportation, Devastating Cost to America, Its Budget, and the Economy, and second, a Center for American Progress report titled Trump's Rash Immigration Actions, Place Cruelty and Spectacle Above Security.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. I yield back to the ranking member.
Chair recognizes Mr. Donalds from Florida.
Thank you, Chairman. This is my third term on the Oversight Committee. We've been talking about illegal immigration and oversight the entire time. I remember we had a group of this committee that went down to the El Paso section of the border. This was back in February, March of 2021. And during that time period, we were at one of the holding centers, and there were these buses that were coming to the detention facility, and they were picking up 30 kids, 50 kids at random, walking out of the facility. And when I went over to question the bus driver that was transporting these kids, border agents told me, as a member of Congress, that you're not allowed to question the bus driver. And of course, people knowing me, I didn't take no for an answer, and I repeated the question. And I was told that this bus of children was leaving El Paso and going to San Diego. And so what was occurring under the Biden administration is that they were busing unaccompanied minors all across the United States for one reason and one reason only. And that was because they did not want the press to see the pictures of kids in cages. They did not want to see our borders being overrun. They wanted to disperse that problem all through the United States. That is the reckless history of illegal immigration under Joe Biden and the Democrat Party. Mayor Johnston of Denver, you lamented earlier that there were 10 to 11 buses coming per day to your city. Did you ever talk to Joe Biden about why this was happening to your community?
Thank you, Congressman. I both reached out to Governor Abbott from Texas. He didn't respond, and I did.
Why would you reach out to Governor Abbott of Texas when it is Joe Biden, the former commander-in-chief, that opened up our borders? Why didn't you talk to him?
Well, our buses directly were being sent from Governor Abbott in Texas, so that was why we reached out to say we're happy to collaborate on a coordinated entry system. We understand no one state or no one city should bear the entire brunt of this, but let's collaborate. But I did.
So I'm glad you said that, because that brings me to my next point. Governor Abbott and Governor DeSantis, when they started moving illegal aliens out of their states, who were bearing the brunt of what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were doing, and they've sent them to Denver, they sent them to Chicago, they sent them to New York, they sent them to Martha's Vineyard. The reason why they did that is because you four could hide behind the realities of illegal immigration on border towns all through our country and on cities and states who did not want to see illegal immigration, but did not have the political representation to go to the White House. And only when it showed up on your doorstep did you get upset. Mayor Johnston, coming back to you, how much did your city spend on illegal immigration? Do you have a round number?
Over the last couple of years, on all newcomers, whatever their status was, it's around $79 million since 2022.
$79 million. Mayor Johnson, Chicago. How much has the city of Chicago spent on illegal immigration?
If you're referring to the 2022 up to 2024 of the buses coming from Texas, roughly the same percentage of the state of Texas, about 1% of our overall budget.
What is that? Because we don't have the city's budget in front of me. Numbers.
It's 1%, and if you want the actual calculation, we can make sure someone.
You're the mayor. You don't have the math in front of you.
It's 1% of the overall budget over the last 4 years.
That's why you're a failing mayor.
Which is
Mayor
the same
Adams,
number that
how
was
much did the
sent from
city of
us
New
from
York
the
actually
state
spend
of
on
Texas.
illegal immigration? Mayor Johnson, I already asked you. You don't have a hard number, and if you don't have a hard number, you're not running your city well. Mayor Adams, how much did the city of New York actually spend on illegal immigration?
$6.9 billion of taxpayers' dollars.
$6.9 billion of taxpayer money on a problem that was fostered on the American people. Mayor Wu, in the city of Boston, how much did you spend?
We don't ask about immigration status and delivering city
You don't
services,
ask
so
about
we
how
don't
much
have
money
that
the city
number.
of Boston has spent on illegal immigration?
We
Are you
don't
out of your
distinguish
mind?
between immigration status.
Do you
as
manage
part
your
of our
budget
city
or not,
policies.
Mayor Wu?
That is how we keep our
Mayor
city
Wu,
safe.
do you manage
We
your
have
budget or
the
not?
numbers to prove it. I manage my budget. I have a AAA bond rating dating back 10 years.
So to the city of Boston,
budget.
just understand that your mayor does not care how much of your resources she has spent on people who are not citizens
The city
of
of Boston
the city of
is
Boston.
sick of having
I'm reclaiming
people
my
outside
time.
Boston
Mr.
telling
Beer,
us what
Mr.
we
Beer, I have
need.
a question for you because I understand Cato's perspective when it comes to illegal immigration. I understand that the Cato Institute for a long time has had a standard of actually having open immigration into the United States. Generally speaking, I don't want to get into specifics.
We support legal immigration. We want immigration to be legal.
So let me ask you this question, because one of the great libertarians of the modern era, Milton Friedman, famously said, you can either have open borders or a welfare state, but you have to choose. Mr. Beer, what do you choose?
Milton Friedman said he wanted to allow illegal immigration to continue. I disagree with Milton Friedman's position on that. We should have legal immigration and build a wall around the welfare state, not around the country. That's in the best interest of taxpayers.
And I would argue that under the current system where you have sanctuary cities popping up, it is not possible to build that wall. So America
can.
has to
Absolutely you
choose,
can.
Mr. Beer, you're done. America has to choose between securing our nation or protecting the taxpayer. I choose secure the nation. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Bell from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the 80s, there was the war on drugs. That didn't go so well. We essentially created classes of criminals for people, citizens, who just needed help. And I won't recount that entire history, but I don't think that we realized the error of our ways until it impacted more affluent communities, particularly with the opioid epidemic. And so now Republicans have began a new campaign, a war on immigrants. And while Republicans and Democrats both recognize the need to strengthen our borders, instead of sitting down and actually fixing the border situation, as has been alluded to, or actually we did that, but then after supporting it, Republicans voted against it after their boss told them not to, which really would have been a win for the American people. So as a former prosecutor, I recognize policing and community relationships go hand in hand. You have to have them in order to be effective with law enforcement. And to get bad people off the streets who are not going to commit a crime in front of a police officer, oftentimes it's our people